Let's get some hands together, gang, for Gideon AI.
Alright, so this deck uses a ton of early game drops to seize control over a single lane, and then keep it and exploit it with cards like Plea to Kinnereth, Warcry, and Divine Fervor. Alright, first game up against a Warrior. We're guessing it's a tempo-based variation. We want our early game drops, so we drop everything. It looks to be a werewolf type deck. Not going to be able to compete in the lane against that kind of thing. I only have one unit in the hand anyway, so go ahead and drop on the right. Turns out he's a very aggressive based werewolf type deck. Might not even have werewolves at this point in the game, we can't really tell just how many, or whether he was just starved for 1-drops. But yeah, it's pretty heavy into the werewolf thing that's going to be some serious value right out of the gate. And our hand is mostly dead. Thankfully, our opponent is playing a little bit more passively with that Warrior's Fury. But it's always scary whenever you see one of those, because of the possibility for improvised weapons, potentially. Falkreath Defiler, a bit out of place. And the Javelin will allow us to retake a bit of the board, especially considering he didn't take the value trade on the Drog. So we can clear his board and develop the scouting party. But it's very expensive, and anything he drops from here on out will probably be from the Shadow Lane, if I had to guess. Unless it's a guard, Sower of Secrets. Thankfully, he doesn't have any drops. Unfortunately, that also means he's probably holding on to some weapons, some burn, potentially. Crushing Blow is rare, but still within the realm of possibilities. Got unlucky with that Prophecy. Cast Out would have hurt on anything else the last turn, so I can see why he would have held it. So now we know he is running a bit more Prophecies than I originally anticipated. Throws the guard into the Shadow Lane, just for future trading purposes. The only thing we can do is push and hope that he doesn't have enough burn to finish out the game. Gonna cast a little bit of an underpowered Imperial Reinforcements into the right lane just so that we can heal up out of the potential burst. We still haven't seen that buffed weapon. There's the Sower. There's another weapon. But it's highly likely we're going to be able to make it past his last 2 runes with the Warcry in hand and the Plea to Kinnereth. That's 12 burst from the hand for 7 Magicka. Didn't even need to use the left lane. Those have been a couple of guards though. Maybe the story would have been a little bit different. Except we got a Spellsword. Of course, there are some token Spellswords running around, but most of them tend to be control. We're going to open up with as much power as possible, as many bodies as possible. Dealing early chip damage is pretty important. Unfortunately, that's going to take a little bit longer than I would have hoped. Crushing Blow would have helped us alleviate that, but at least the Cleric can make it a bit harder for the opponent to get value out of that drop. We're going to save the Ring Charge because we're pretty much out of cards at this point. That really hurts too. 2-5 with Drain, and Guard is just awful to have to bust through in the early game. Gonna punch that guy in just so the opponent can't take him out with the other 2-1. And I'm just gonna hang on to Shadowmere. It's not really much of a reason to play it at that point, except to put it into the left lane to hit face. We could play some other things, but it seems very important to get this Divine Favor out of our hands. In case we draw a Javelin next turn, it would be very nice to use that on a potential Phalanx, but he did not have it. Another Barrow Stalker. Thankfully, we can kill this one before it gets any hits in, but we're still very low on chip damage. Loyal Housecarl is not the kind of thing I like to see usually, but in this case, it lets us get a pretty neat value trade in the left lane. Out of ring charges and pretty much out of cards yet again. Go ahead and drop the Draugr into the right lane, and Hallowed Death Priest, funnily enough, upgrading Shadowmere to a 2/2, which is now a 3/3, with the Divine Fervor. Probably good for us in general. Gonna hold on to the Warcry, just because dealing the 6 damage it would have done would have just given him another draw, another opportunity to prophecy his way out of this mess. I don't like the sweet roll getting rid of the Draugr and subtracting 1 damage from my board, but it can Warcry anyway, so I'm fine with that. Gonna get a little value trade so that the Hallowed Death Priest doesn't heal up off of the sweet roll, just in case this turns into a more sluggish kind of battle. Clockwork Dragon is very scary. Grizzly Gourmet does not actually have a target, which is really great. Divine Fervor screws that card up pretty heavily. And we're getting this guy very low in health. Of course, he has a pretty huge buff on that Drain creature. I go ahead and sacrifice the Sweet Roll into the right lane because it was probably going to die if I put the buff guy in the left lane anyway. So I preserve as much power in the right lane as possible. And I'm going to cash in that full strength Warcry, 8 damage, just in case something crazy happens and I'm not able to get in all damage. This would be lethal. There's the Prophecy. And Cloud Rest Illusionist. Lethal denied. So I get to Javelin, the 10 power Drain creature in the other lane. And with the amount of power the opponent has on board, if he has more burst from the hand, he would be able to kill me. Maybe 2 Crushing Blows. Or, well, looks like he doesn't have it. So he's going to try and guard up the right lane. Another Grizzly Gourmet. Hitting an Iliac Sorcerer, reducing my power by 1. But I have lethal on board. Gonna try and progress a bit more towards my support quest. Not BM, guys. Hashtag not BM. You see? Support quest. Alright, coming up into the third match. Facing off against a Crusader. We're going to assume that it's aggro of some kind. Whether tokens or charge. So this is a pretty good hand. Lots of heal for the matchup. Opponent has a 5th Legion Trainer on the first turn, which trades very easily into the Broom of Profiteer for us. Really don't want to get too much value out of that for the opponent. Mighty Ally, though, that signifies a greater reliance on strength, so he might not even be running Imperial Reinforcements. Might not really have that much of a payoff. So we're going to get the 3 cost out of our hands because if we end up if he has a Sharpshooter Scout or something, then we'd probably have to trade something into that 7/3 in order to stop him. He's got a Cloud Rest Illusionist, something of the sort, which kills our guy more or less for free. Breakthrough really hurting there. But we do have the 3/3, and he does not have heal, so that's not super important. We're going to try and maximize the heal from the Imperial Reinforcements and drop both of our guys in the left lane, even though he probably has Chargers that can take him out, which he did. However, that exacted a very heavy attacks on his own game plan, which is killing us, ultimately. So forcing him to drop such low tempo plays on turn 4 and 5 is very good for us. Especially considering we only put in 2 points of magic ourselves into that. Opponent drops an aggressive Rift Thane when he had the choice of dropping a defensive one, which would have forced me to drop all of my Imperial reinforcements into that one guy. That would have actually been a very, very valuable play, tempo-wise. But he's thinking about killing me before I kill him, clearly. I'm getting some burst, getting some burn. Got a full board. Divine Fervor would be 5 cost, 8 damage. It'd also make my board immune to Sharpshooter Scouts. But, we got the 12 damage in the hand for 7 cost. We're going to split up our attacks just to minimize the impact of prophecies. Hitting in the 1 health creatures first, just to play around Sharpshooter Scout. Looks like we got it. Bleeded Kinnereth, right lane, Prophecy, gets a guard, denies lethal. So now we have to rely on a Prophecy to save us. Prophecy or 2. If he strikes in with the 9/3 first, then we could get 2 guard creatures. If he strikes in with the 2 first, we could get the guard creature or a javelin. Don't get out of those. It's a lot of damage. This deck is not good. It does not have a great win rate. Even though I went 7 and 5 in the Grand Melee, most of those wins were against either poor players or players with highly unoptimized decks. This deck relies so heavily on your opponent not doing anything to interfere with its strategy that it falls flat on its face. Not to mention the fact that we're running very many subpar cards to build around the good cards that activate only when you dump a ton of other cards into specific lanes. So Warcry is good as a 4 cost, deal 8 damage. It is not good as a 4 cost, deal 4 damage, or 4 cost, deal 2 damage. There are very few cards that enable it to deal 8 damage alone. Those cards could probably fit into their own deck, so somebody could probably come up with a really solid Bone Colossus, Imperial Reinforcements, maybe even Black March, Warden type of deck that stalls the opponent out and then comes out of nowhere with this huge burst in a very small amount of cards, while other control decks use things like Manticoras and Kanos to build up a huge board. So a bit of a quicker kind of control gameplay, but this deck, the Zoo style, doesn't function at this stage of the game. If more cards come out to support it, then potentially that could be a very potent strategy. But as of yet, the 3 cost 4/4 with charge and the 4 cost deal 8 damage to face is mostly a pipe dream.